Hello guys, my name is Zamin and I'm here to talk about Onion Arch for enterprise applications. For those who may not know about Onion Arch, it's a domain-centric architecture which focuses on the business logic through the domain. It means that your core layer, especially your domain, is the most important part of your application. This video focuses on enterprise architecture, and I assume that you know a little about Onion architecture. But if you don't know much about it, don't worry. Just follow the rest of the video and you figure it out.
Okay, here I am on a Visual Studio. I already created a blank solution. Let's start with SRC folder. I'm gonna create a solution folder named SRC and good to go. First of all, we need to create our core layer. As I said, the core layer is the heart of our project. You may know that we have domain and application service project on our core layer. So let me just create a solution folder named core, and before I create a project, let's show you a schema of our layers. Core layer. As you see, domain is the heart of our project. It contains business logic, entities, value object, and others. Above domain, we have contracts. Contract project belongs to application service, but in enterprise purposes, we are separating them because you may need to reference your contracts to infrastructure or other layers. But if you reference your application service there, that's not cool. Many knows contract as service.abstraction and application service as service, but I'm gonna call it contracts, and it belongs to our application service, but we are separating that because we need the benefits of that. As you see in the picture, domain has no dependency on any project or any framework. It's very important to isolate your project, your domain, your core layer from frameworks, because if your domain dependent on any project or any framework, your business is dependent on it, and it's very bad. So all your needs in the domain, for example, you need log, you need other stuff, do it with contracts and interfaces. So let's back to Visual Studio. First of all, I'm gonna create domain project on the core layer. I'm gonna create new class library, and here I'm gonna name it as enterprise arch dot domain. Enterprise arch is my solution name and domain is the project name. But before domain, I'm gonna add core dot core because we are on the core layer. Domain is a part of our core layer. And let me just reference it. I'm gonna create SRC and the core layer on my disk. Okay, good to go. I'm gonna use .NET 7. There are many benefits on .NET 7. Okay, so it's created. I'm gonna delete. Good. As I said before, contracts are part of our application service project, but we're gonna separate them because we wanna reference our contracts to other projects, other layers. So I'm gonna create contracts project. I'm gonna copy this and go add new project, class library, and call it contracts. It's a contract of our core layer. We will see that what we're gonna do. Okay, I'm gonna create it. I'm going to reference domain to contracts. It's very important. Only our contracts project can access domain. None of these layers should have access to domain, but it's application service who have access to that domain. But I'm going to separate abstraction, so I'm going to put it on a contract. So let's create application service project. I'm going to copy this and go create, add new project, class library, and call it application services. And I'm going to put it on core. And I'm going to reference contracts to application service, not the domain. As I said before, contracts and application service are the same, but I'm separating them. Okay, you can add domain service assembly on the core layer and reference contracts to it, but I don't have very difficult business logic here, so I'm not gonna do that. Every one of your core project dependency, for example, you wanna use database, you wanna use repository, you must fill the dependencies with dependency injection with interfaces. You can't use the direct implementation on your core layer because you are depending it on other framework and other stuff. So do not do that, and you are breaking the rule. There are two ways to create folders in our assemblies. One by feature and two by behavior. For example, you have to-do task feature on your application and you wanna create entities, create repositories, create other stuff for this. You can just create entities folder here and entities, put all your entities in here, and or create a folder by features. For example, to-do task is my feature, so I'm gonna create a to-do task folder and I'm gonna put all the entities like this and all the value objects here like this again. I like it by feature better because it's more module and it's more neat. I like it. It's my opinion, but you can use by behavior separation too. You can separate your folders by behavior or you can separate it by features. So I'm gonna choose the feature. It's very neat. So the purpose of this video is teach you about enterprise arch, not teach you about entities or value object or CQRs or other stuff. So I already created a project here. Let me show you. Advanced arch, okay, and I put it on GitHub. You can check it from the description, and I'm gonna copy all this stuff to my project. I'm not gonna waste your time on creating entities, but I'm gonna explain what I'm doing here. Okay, first let's copy these folders, these two folders from domain into our into our project. Okay, I'm gonna paste my stuff here. Okay, good to go. Let me explain. The common layer is where I put my common and shared stuff there. For example, I have share value objects or share enums. I put it here. It's very neat. For example, ID is a share base value object. Is a value object. So I'm gonna put it here. But I suggest you to put this stuff on your library that you are developing for your business. For example, this base value object, you can put it on your framework and then install the package, and you get package here. So I have a base value object. It's a base behavior of value object, and I implemented them. It's an abstract class, and I created ID value object, which is just a value object of ID, and it's just comparing them and do a bunch of stuff that value objects must to do. So, and I have a name value object, which is just the value objects of name. It's not very important, and it doesn't have any logic on it because I didn't have my logic. It's my custom business. You can do your own. Okay. On the to-do task, I have entities here. For example, it's aggregate root, so you can create class name, aggregate root, and inheritance from that. It's very better, and I suggest you to do that. It's very better. Yeah. It has 5 properties: ID and name, date, time, and state. State is a enum that have disabled, in process, active, and done. It's not very important. You can create base entity and inherit your aggregate roots class from base entity and put ID on that. So look at here, I put all my entities on private set because I don't want other classes or other methods override my state or change my state. I'm going to do it myself with my methods here. For example, we have next step that change the state. It's a behavior for entity. It's domain-driven design. So if you don't know about it, go to domain-driven design by Eric Evans. It's our domain. It's very neat. It's very cool and it's easier to develop our application. So let me just build my project. Okay, and for the contracts project, I have to put my, for example, I say to do tasks. I need commands, queries, because I'm doing CQRS enterprise project. Queries and services, repositories, or a bunch of other stuff that you want. Stories. Okay, good to go. Let me just bring stuff from my project here. Okay, contract, and I copy all this stuff, put it down here. Okay, good to go. Command is where I put my commands, not implementation of that, just the command. Okay, and I'm using CQRS and Mediator here, so if you don't know what Mediator is, just search. But I said before, your application cannot depend on any framework. What I'm gonna do is contracts, not any implementation. That's very important to keep it on your mind. Mediator. I'm going to install Mediator contracts here and good to go. Let me just build this project and all right. Okay, let me reference it. Good, and all right. On the common folder here, I have my utilities, which is an object mapper. I suggest you to put it on your framework or library that you're developing because it's better for your application and you won't repeat yourself. And I have a command repository here, which is a base repository behaviors. For example, delete, insert, get, and commit. These commits should be on a unit of work. Then implement your unit of work, inherited from unit of work, and that's very better. Do not put it on here. Okay. And I have iQuery repository because I wanna do the dependency injection and all this stuff. It's better. Okay. I have my query models here. It's my DTOs that I wanna transform object on my query. I have iDTO, which is an input DTO that's an interface. It's an input DTO that I can filter my request and bunch of stuff. And I have outputs to do task DTO, which I transfer my data to UI or other stuff. And I have my repositories here. I inherited from command repository, and I have query repository here, and I made a select method and just gonna get to do task DTO and filter it. And I have my domain services here. It's domain service. You can put it on here, for example, to the task manager and do your business logic here. Okay, good to go. Enough with commands, and let's go to application service. On the application service layer, you just implement your business rules. For example, you have create a to-do task. That's use case, that's business rule you have to implement. You can implement your business rules here. Let me just copy this stuff from Advanced Arch here. Yeah, go to, okay, I have to do task, I have command, and it's a create to do task command, and I have create to do task command handler here, and it's just gonna handle my request and do all the stuff. It's very neat, yeah, very neat. I use mediator here for my purposes, so I'm gonna copy this, but before that let me explain you about queries. It's a get to do tasks request, and it just do the request, and it returns the to do task in a variable. Okay, let me just copy this stuff and put it on my enterprise arch layer. Okay, let me just fix this namespaces and using, so I need mediator package for this, and let me just install it. Mediator package, and I'm gonna install mediator. Okay, good to go. Let me just using it, and let me fix my namespaces. And here and here, we are good to go. Let me build my project, and it's all right. So I implement my business rules and my use cases, and here I have create to do task, and I'm gonna implement it here. But keep it on your mind, I'm not explaining CQRS or what command handler. It's on CQRS, so we're just gonna talk about enterprise arch. It's not purpose of video to talk about stuff from DDD and CQRS. Okay, that's it. That's our core layer. Let's go to infrastructure. Infrastructure is a layer that we are communicating with outside world. As you see, core was a main layer, and it was very important, and it's harder to develop because all your business logic is in there, and you have to go research for your business and implementing that on there. But your business is just communicating with outside world with interfaces, so you just implement those interfaces on infrastructure. So let's go to Visual Studio and create our infrastructure. Okay, I'm gonna create a solution folder name infra. It means infrastructure. Okay, so you have tools infrastructure, you have data infrastructure, you have IoC infrastructure, and other bunch of stuff that you want. So for your communication to other world, just see which purpose you are working with. For example, I'm developing data. I'm gonna implement my repository, so I'm gonna create data layer, and we have tools layer on infrastructure, and we have a bunch of stuff. For example, IOC on our infrastructure. But I'm just gonna implement data first. So I'm gonna create a project name enterprise arch dot infra dot data dot SQL command SQL command. Yes, I want to communicate with SQL with my command. So I'm using CQRS. But if you're not using CQRS, you can just say SQL Server. But I'm using CQRS, and I'm gonna say it's SQL commands, and I'm gonna put it on this location. It's src infra data, and yeah, here it's good to go. I'm using a 7, and cool. As I said before, only application service can access domain. So I'm just gonna reference my contract to this project, because I said it, I'm gonna create contracts to avoid referencing application service and my handler to infrastructure layer. So I'm gonna just reference contracts and use contracts, not domain, not application service. It's very important. Okay, as I said before, we are separating our folders by feature. So I'm gonna create my feature named to do task here, and I'm gonna implement my repositories and other stuff here. But I don't want to waste your time, so I'm gonna go to the advanced arch and copy this stuff. But before I copy, let me explain what is it. Yes. And infra data command. Okay, I have common layer. It's where I put my DB context. I'm using EF core, so I have DB context, and I'm just implementing my EF core concept. Okay, I inherited from DB context, and I create DB set, and just that. Okay, I have base command repository here. It's a implementation of my repository. It's generic repository. It's a generic repository that I'm using. Okay, I have my migrations, so we're gonna add our own migration there, and I have to do task, which is my feature. I have configs for that. For example, I have conversion for ID, because I used value object there, and I'm just gonna change the behavior with identity type configuration. So you can use your MongoDB or whatever you are using, Redis or whatever. You can put it on data, but I'm using SQL Server, so I'm gonna implement with EF core. But if you are using MongoDB, you can implement it by Mongo Drive and a bunch of other stuff. And I have my to-do task command repository here, which inherited from command repository, and I to-do task command repository. Okay, let me bring this stuff to my project. I'm gonna copy this, and I'm gonna paste it here. I need to install EF core, because I'm using EF core. So see, I'm using EF core, so it's cool to use a framework on infrastructure layer, because you are communicating with outside world. So let me install Microsoft Entity Framework. Okay, here it is. I'm gonna install this package and SQLS server package. Okay, I'm gonna add tools too, because I want migration. I want to use migration and a bunch of stuff. So that's it. Let me just reference it and see it's all right. I have my migration. Let me just using this. I have my configs here. It's cool. Okay. I have command repository here. All right. But you may notice that I'm using entity, which is on domain, on the infrastructure. But that's cool because I'm just gonna use EF core. For this purpose it's okay, but for more it's not. You can't new your entity on the infrastructure layer or do other stuff. So that's it with the infrastructure, and we just implement SQL.command. Let me implement queries too. I want to implement queries, so I'm gonna copy this and add new project, class library, and let's call it SQL Server Queries. So I'm gonna put it on infra data, and okay, using that at 7. And still I'm adding and I'm referencing contract project. So as I said before, we are separating our write and query behavior called CQRS. CQRS means command query responsibilities segregation. Okay, so I'm using CQRS here, but I don't want to explain CQRS because it's about architecture, not about CQRS. Okay, let me bring this stuff from my advanced arch and see how we are doing it. If you guys don't know about CQRS and you want to know, just comment on this video. I will record a video about this if you want it. I have my extension here. It's a query extension that I use where if. I have condition here, and if this condition was true, I will use a where condition for my query. It's just extension that I'm using on a query level. You can put it on your framework or library that you're developing. I have my models here, for example, Arch query DB context that I'm using for my query DB context, and I have to install EF core. So let me just copy this stuff from here. Okay, and put it on here. Good to go. So I have my models, which is a EF core scap folder. You have to separate your models from your entities. That's very important. So I have base query DB context for here, which I just said I override the DB save changes, and I said no tracking behavior because EF core has change tracker behavior. So I'm gonna disable it to have more performance on my queries. I have base query here, which is just a class base repository here, and just put DB context on here and I can use it. And for my feature, I have to do task query, and I have object mapper, which is mapper that use auto mapper, and I'm just gonna write that's gonna execute a query for me. Here's my query, and here's my filters, and here's my results, and I will return it. Use auto mapper to just do a bunch of stuff with it. So that's just infrastructure. Okay, on the tools, infrastructure data is finished. Let's go to tools. On the tools, we can implement our automapper. We can put our profiles, automapper profiles there, and do a bunch of stuff. For example, if you have translator for your project, you can put it on tools. Your implementation will be placed in the tools, not the core layer or other layers, just the tools. Infrastructure tools. Very important to keep it on your mind. Okay, I have automapper and I'm gonna copy this, but before that let me just create my project here. I'm gonna add new project, Enterprise Arch, and here I'm gonna name it tools.automapper. If you have your translator or other tools, you can just create your project and put it here. I'm gonna locate it to infrastructure tools. I'm gonna create a tools folder and put it here. Okay, I'm gonna reference contracts to my project, and let me bring this stuff from here. I have a to-do task profile, which is just a to-do task model to my DTO. Let me just the profile, and I have common layer, which is an automapper adapter. I'm using automapper, so I'm just gonna keep it. I get all my profiles here, and I'm gonna just implement my mapper. It's an adapter for my automapper. So let me copy this to my project. I'm gonna reference two other stuff. Okay, here on tools, paste it. Let me save and okay, good to go. Okay, so I need to install automapper library here. Copy this from here, automapper, and not here. Let me just install this, and I need to reference the infra query for my models. Put it here. Okay, let me just install my automapper here. Okay, here, yeah, let me install this, and using this, good to go. Okay, it's used the domain, but I have to use the model, so it's very important to know that. Just be careful about that, it's very dangerous. Okay, I'm gonna reference this to my project. I'm gonna using it, and let me using this too. Yeah, good to go. Let me just build it. Okay, yeah, I forgot to use my extension. Yeah, that's about infrastructure layer. So only one layer left, endpoints. Let's go to presentation on endpoint layer. At last, the endpoint layer. Many of you know it as presentation layer, but I'm separating my client and backend for enterprise purposes, so I'm gonna call it endpoints. The difference between endpoint and infrastructure is on the infrastructure we are communicating with outside world, but on an endpoint outside world is communicating with us through the API. So let's just back to the code and implement that. As I said before, I'm gonna separate my front end and back end for enterprise purposes. So I'm gonna create an endpoint layer here, and points. I'm gonna create ASP.NET Core project. Okay, dot endpoints dot API, and I'm gonna put it on src endpoints, and here, good to go. I'm gonna use .NET 7. Yeah, good to go. Let's just create it, and we have our ASP.NET Core API. I'm gonna set it as a startup project. Okay, I'm gonna start with my feature to-do task. So I'm gonna add it here. And let me just grab this from. Oh, I need to reference the application service and infrastructure layers to my endpoint, because endpoints can use all this stuff. Let me just add new controller, I'm going to use API and empty. I'm going to call it to the tasks controller. Let me just write it here, to the tasks. Okay, and okay. Let me just change the namespace to scope, file scope namespace, and okay. So let me just copy from advanced arch. So I use mediator for sending it to my handler. I get query from here. I have a get to do task method to with get template, and I will get a query from my request, and I will send it to my mediator to handle it for me, and I will return a result here. And if I had extension, I will return internal server error. Okay, but you can put all this try cache and all this mediator send to implementation on your library. For example, you can do a base controller here, and you can put the mediator there and say, for example, create method, and just return it. Just call that, and do not repeat yourself with try and cache. For example, I did it on try and cache on my create to do task method. Create to do task method is same with query. I get a command and I send it to mediator and I return a result. It's very simple. Okay, so I said you can use the base controller. I will show you at the end of the video some samples for your enterprise application and some libraries that are open source on GitHub. Okay, on the program I have to configure my application, so let's just configure. I'm going to on my advanced arch project, and on program I'm going to copy all the stuff and put it on my enterprise application. So as you see, I missed the add common service. Okay, why? Because I have a hosting extension on advanced arch here, hosting extension, which I add mediator, repositories, and automapper, and I done it with extension on my dependency extension here, which just scan the assemblies for my assemblies. I use this package named Scrotter, and let me just grab this stuff on my project to show you. And here we go. Okay, let me just delete this. Okay, sort my codes and good to go. I need to add these two files to my project to work with hosting extension that I said before and dependency extension. Okay, I'm gonna paste it all here and fix the namespaces. And here, yeah, okay, good to go. And as you see, I have it here and I reference it, and it's all okay, it's all good. And if I put my connection string on my project, let me just using this stuff. Okay, and let me just add my connection string to my project from advanced arch here, and connection string, and I put it here. Okay, as I told you, initialize our project, and I will put advanced arch on my GitHub and put it on description to you can check it out if you want it. Introduce you to some open source libraries on GitHub, so check it out. But if you don't know anything about CQRS or a bunch of stuff that I told you here, mediator, CQRS, and other, if you wanted to, just comment and tell me to record a video about it. Open source projects. Okay, I put advanced arch project on GitHub. You can check it out. I will put it on description. But let me show you about this framework. It's called Zamin. It's developed by Ali Reza Urumand, and it's useful for enterprise purposes. So it's basically what we said on this video. It's all this implementation, all this framework is covered by Zamin, and just check it out. It's very good for your knowledge. If you want it, just check it out and give it a star. It's very good. And next is Lipar. It's based on Zamin. It's inspired by Zamin, but it's an old structure. It's not like the Zamin new structures. So check it out. Next is aspnetboilerplate, I guess. Yeah, something like that. So check it out. I will put it on description. Thanks for watching. Please follow our channel and like this video if you liked, and do not forget about comments.